So I'd like to welcome Megan back to this next episode.
Me too.
She's been begging me to come back.
Mum, play it cool, all right?
Yes, so for the context of the listeners, this is my daughter Megan, who's 28. She's my firstborn, and the sister of Sam, who I interviewed on the first and second podcasts. And I thought it would be a great way to start my venture by really getting to hear their take on the relationships within the family and within themselves. So on this episode, we thought we'd dive in a little bit deeper, because although we have some beautiful memories of our family together and how we've all learnt together, it hasn't always been easy for you. It has been a tricky life. And before we go into it, I just want to go back to the beginning for me. It was relatively easy to conceive Megs. I always wanted a girl. And when I finally found out I was pregnant back in the 90s, you didn't do the sex. So we didn't know, but I just knew I had a girl.
Sorry, you didn't do the sex in the 90s.
Well, we did the sex, but we didn't find out the sex.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
It just wasn't a thing then. You know, the suspense was waiting until the moment of birth. But I just knew I was having a daughter. Every fibre of my body, I knew you were going to be called Megan. We had to find a boy's name just in case. And it was going to be Jacob.
I'm not a Jacob.
You're not a Jacob.
No.
And there were some complications in the pregnancy, in as much as I was having some Braxton Hicks, which are uterus tightenings. And we went and I was checked one day when I was 28 weeks pregnant with you, and they said I was going into labour. And the naivety of me as a mum was, oh, no, it'll be fine. I want to meet her. And the nurses were going, no, you do not want to have this baby now. And so I had drugs, and the labour settled down, and I went back into labour with you again at 32 weeks. And again, they said it was too early. As it turns out, you were born on the day, the due date. And
Nothing if not punctual.
And was it an easy birth? Going into labour with you this time round, I got very scared, and the labour stopped, and so they had to restart us the next day. So looking at all that in the way that I view life now, looking back at that start, it just feels very clear to me. Yes, we can look at it on a medical level, but it just felt very clear that you really didn't want to come in.
It sounds like I did, but just coming in to leave, probably.
But it's, no, I don't want to do this. And I am going, no, you can do this. We're going to be okay. I can help you. I can save you. And then, no, I really don't. And then the birth process was, nope, I really don't want to come in. And then when you were born, you came in with a cord around your neck. And there was a very few anxious moments where I'm calling across the delivery suite saying, breathe, baby, breathe. And it really set the scene for you.
What a start, hey?
The message at the beginning of how hard life can be for you. And it's remarkable how you've turned out, how you're here with the story that you've had. Not only what we heard in the last episode about the divorce that you've gone through and anorexia. And I think that's going to be the essence of what we talk about today, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. I guess a good thing to give a like trigger warning. I'm sure it will be talked about very sensitively, but obviously if any listeners do have an experience with an eating disorder or childhood trauma or depressive episodes, just warning, I'm coming in hot.
Yeah, and suicidal thoughts. And
yeah.
So you can be as open as you want, and I will certainly caveat that for the listeners before they listen.
Yeah. Okay.
So give me your early experiences of when you started to think life was hard for you.
I will start in a second. I think my younger years, I do remember being quite a happy child until I was about sort of 6 years old, and I won't go into it now, but I had some quite severe trauma as a child around that age. And I think from that moment, everything changed. And I went from being what I remember as a fairly outgoing, happy child to a very withdrawn, very quiet, very depressed child. I think, I remember the story a lot that you told me that I was drawing one day and you asked me what I was drawing. And I said, "It's a gun, mummy, I want to die." And I think that,
You were 8.
yeah. And that, like, what child does that? And so I think that what happened to me just really set my life on a different trajectory to what it could have been. And I was also born with one leg shorter than the other, which meant I, had awful blocks on my shoes that alienated me from kids at school. And although I had really, really great friendships, I also was fairly bullied for being Meg with the peg leg. And so I think that, again, that was difficult. To which then at the age of 10, I had my leg operated on and lengthened. So I had a big frame around my leg, which lengthened my leg by a millimetre a day or something like that. And I was in a wheelchair and then on crutches, and then the rehabilitation process was really long. So I just wasn't dealt the easiest hand, really, to come into everything with. And I think I recognise it's a lot for a young child to go through. When I think about what happened to my leg, it's so brutal, and it consumed our family, and it, it revolved around me going to those appointments, and me, it was all consuming. So I think that and I recognise around that time as well, by not being able to move my body and being immobile in all essence. I put weight on as a child, as any child who can't run around would do. But that played a big part into things as well. And I was a fairly chubby child, I think is probably fair to say. And so issues with my body and my relationship with my body changed really, really young. So I always struggled with being larger, and I always thought being larger meant that I was vulnerable. So with the trauma that happened to me at 6, I associated with being bigger. The bullying I associated with being bigger. And so it almost, the story writes itself, that I was going to end up thinking that by shrinking would make me safer. And I think that was a huge impetus for the eating disorder to settle in, because I just wanted to be invisible, because I just thought I keep getting hurt by being seen. So I just shrank myself. And I think that when you look at the psychology of it, it totally makes sense why I did that. But on the surface, no one could understand, because we were a happy family and I had 2 loving parents and I was provided for. And I don't think anyone could understand why I would want to do that. And it's only as I've gotten older and had my own therapy and worked through things with you that it makes total sense that I was going to end up a not very well girl.
And of course, back in the 90s or early 2000s, is that we didn't have the social media stigma of, slim is better. But you innately knew the need to want to shrink. Do you think that there was any knowledge on a conscious level about anorexia or needing to starve yourself?
Yeah, I think that it was still the 90s. There was still everywhere that thin is best. I mean, there was Kate Moss's "Nothing Tastes as Good as Skinny Feels" came out in the 90s, early 2000s, right? Like, it was just it's always been a toxic place for women wherever. And so not only did I have that internal feeling of, if I shrink myself, I'm better and I'm safer and I'll be happier, that was also then, I guess, magnified everywhere. So there was always an association that being bigger was worse. So I think that all those subliminal messages, I don't remember it being a conscious thing of thinking I'm gonna starve myself now. It was more of I just want to stop feeling this way, and food was just the thing that I used to numb everything and hide everything, I suppose.
And it's very well known that anorexia is not as slim as disease. It's
Yeah,
a form of control, and
yeah,
that was, as a young child who had felt very much out of control, who's growing up trying to work out who she is, and all your experiences. That was the only thing that you could control.
yeah.
Now,
It feels
if
like a cliche. It's so true, and I think I couldn't control anything that happened to me. I couldn't control that my leg was much shorter than the other. I couldn't control that what happened to me, and it was probably the only thing where I still couldn't control it because I was a child, and I think I was 11 the first time I tried to stop eating, or I used food as a method of control, and it just developed and got worse and worse and worse. And I think that's really young to want to destroy yourself. But it was just I just never had any control.
is causing a
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But very much temporary. Caused a lot more problems than it solved.
and how do you remember it evolving and ramping up?
I remember the first time that I think you'd found my diary, and then we had a big family meeting, and it was like, we love you, we just don't want you to hurt yourself, like, please start eating. And I think for a couple of days it was like, I thought, all right, I think this will be fine. And then it just then became more secretive. So it just, I'd say I probably have had the eating disorder since I was 11, and it till 21 was bad in many different forms, but it ramped up. And when I was 16, I went into an inpatient unit. That was probably the best thing that happened to me. I think that did save me. And it just, yeah, I guess over the years developed, ramped up. I became way more secretive, way more withdrawn, really just living within the eating disorder. So it's quite hard for me to have solid memories of my childhood and my teenage years, because it's so interwoven with food and fear of food and wanting to restrict it, and then sometimes wanting to overeat. And it was such a complex battle, and I was so malnourished that it feels like it stole my formative years from me, because I just don't remember a lot of them.
I remember your therapist once telling you that, when you stop eating, your brain goes cold.
Mm,
It cools down, and
yeah.
food warms the brain up. And
I
over
even
the
had it yesterday. Sorry to interrupt you. That I came to stay with Sam and his girlfriend Emily yesterday, and I got here about 2 o'clock, and I hadn't eaten. I'd gone out shopping, and I realised, I was like, oh shit, it's 2 o'clock, and I've not had breakfast. And I felt so. It was like there was a wall between me and them, and it was. I felt notably not myself and insecure and paranoid. And then I was like, I just need to eat them and I'll be better and I'll warm up again. But it's so strange that feeling was how I felt all the time. So no wonder my relationships all fell apart, and that the family dynamics were so difficult, because it was just like there was a wall, an impenetrable wall between me and everyone else that I think felt safe, and it felt like this really fucked up little friend that kept me safe and not hurt, because I couldn't connect with anybody. But for everyone else trying to connect to me, it was really, really difficult.
It's amazing the disconnect that you could do, even now, and you're
Yeah,
healed, is that you still don't recognize all those hours that have passed that you haven't clicked in that I need to eat.
yeah,
That pass
and
those hours pass you by.
I think that's the problem with having had, what was it, 15 years of an eating disorder, that the pathways in my brain are wired in a certain way that I'm able to navigate. And I was excited to eat when I got to my brother's house, and I was like, I know what I need to do that's going to pull me back. And that's the difference, right? That yes, things aren't always going to be wired in the same way. Someone's not had an eating disorder in my brain, but I'm able to challenge and navigate. And now food is something where I see as love and joy and family and friendship and nourishment. And it's such a lovely shift, but there are still times where it's hard.
And as you went into the starvation part,
Mm.
what do you remember of the thoughts of where it was taking you? What was the end goal you were looking for, do you think?
it didn't really feel like there was an end goal. I think it just felt it's so difficult to, because I guess there's been so many different versions of the eating disorder that it's so weird to put myself back in that first thing. I think I just was like, this will be a solution. This will take the pain away. This, by shrinking, I'm just going to be safe. And I think that that's what it was. It was just the smaller I get, the less I'll be noticed. When actually it did the complete opposite, and everyone was on my back. But I think it was the goal felt more about stopping to exist almost.
When we went through the memory boxes, you'd kept a few of your diaries. There was always an unfinished diary and a new one started. This is going to be the new plan. But the theme of it was always the plan of how you were going to lose weight, but also how much you hated yourself. The less you ate, the more you hated yourself.
Yeah, that's so awful. So
distressing.
I think, and again, having been in lots of experiences with people with eating disorders and lots of therapy sessions, it's the most destructive. I don't want to generalize. Lots of mental health conditions are really destructive, but for me, it's just because you're not allowing yourself the most basic of needs. That it got to the point I was like drinking water felt scary, or that I didn't deserve to be hydrated. I didn't deserve to eat, and it's just slow suicide, isn't it? And then I think the more that you're malnutritioned, the more your brain's like doesn't want to exist, and I think it became really bad for me, and I was really unwell.
And if the adult in you're sitting here now looking at that child that wanted to keep starving herself and wanted to die, what do you think she really needed?
It's a good question. My first thought was she needed the things that happened to her to not have happened. And I think I recognised that was such a big trajectory shift of that. It almost felt unavoidable. And, there's a huge correlation between abuse and eating disorders. It almost is like written in the stars once it's happened to you, because you're just trying to reclaim your body in a destructive way, but you're still, I decide what happens to my body. And I think there's a lot, it's just so deep. And I guess it was, maybe I was young and I wanted my family around me, but then when that brought you around me, I didn't want it. So maybe we were just replaying the push and pull thing of you and me when we were younger. I don't know.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Me neither.
Yeah, that I want you to save me. No, I don't want you.
Yeah.
You being in control of it because you were once that child.
I can decide. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Oh my God, it was all my fault.
I'll send you the therapy bills.
But
we can laugh.
Yeah, if it's okay with you to talk about those times when it really was you were at your wit's end, and I'll come back and give my take on it afterwards. But we nearly lost you many times, and we were all very powerless to it. And are you able to put into words where you were at when you were going through all those thought processes of?
Yeah, I think for me, the most pivotal time that feels to talk about was when I was 22 at university, and I had a traumatic experience at uni, and everything just got too much. But by that point, I think the sort of my depressive thoughts had got so much that not only had I pushed you all away, but you also were like, we can't help you anymore. And it got to that point where I was like, I don't have anybody. And I took an overdose and ended up in urgent care completely alone. And they asked for my next of kin, and I wouldn't give your name because I didn't want you to know. And you only found out through my housemate, didn't you? And the doctor came and spoke to me, and she was like, darling, you've taken it too far now, and this is bad. And I just remember lying there and hugging my body and just saying that I am so sorry for everything I've done to you, and I will never treat you like that again, and I will never hate you. and just like, please make me survive, please let me survive. And I did. I'm here and I'm well, and I have no lasting repercussions from that, thankfully. But for me, it was that moment when I realized, like, I probably never actually wanted to die. I just wanted the pain to stop, and it was torment in my head all the time. It was a constant voice that was telling me, you're fat, you're disgusting, you're worthless, nobody loves you, you're ugly. You're like, it was just consistently like the most horrific monologue that just never stopped. So no wonder I wanted things to stop. But I think for me, that moment was truly hitting rock bottom. But that was the moment where, and they say it, don't they, that hitting rock bottom gives you something to push off. And just that, it's probably the most healing moment of my life, lying there alone, but connecting and loving my body for the first time, probably since I was 6 years old. And I've never looked back.
Talked about, not sure what the end point was, but in that moment, it was probably the first time you met yourself.
Yeah.
And all those feelings are all projected on it's everybody else's fault. They did that, and I want to push my family away, and not seeing what everybody's trying to affirm you for.
Yeah.
But in that moment, lonely in the bed, when all you had was yourself, and you being told, that you're at the edge here, you're at the precipice.
Yeah. And it breaks my heart, because there's so many people who, it could have been so easily different for me, that I could have woken up, well, I could have not woken up the next day, or things hadn't got better. And I feel very lucky that I had another chance, because there's probably lots of people who might have felt exactly the same way that I did, but didn't get the second chance. And I just, it's so difficult being in that situation. And I so wish that I'd been able to, or felt deserving of asking for help. And that, I think, because it had been so many years of putting you all through that, it was almost like I was just so embarrassed that it happened again, and that I didn't want to put you through it again. And it's just too much for one family to go through. It's just horrific. And it wasn't just my pain. That was all of you having to experience that with me. But it was only me who could control that. And no matter what you did, you were helpless to that, the illness. And as much as I was ill, it's so hard to distance the illness from the person at times. So I am very, very sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. But hey, I'm better now. Yeah, I'm sorry for what I put you all through, and I'm sorry to myself that I went through that as well. But at the time, I was just like on self-destruct and didn't understand why you all cared. And now, as someone with a really good relationship with you guys, but also a really good relationship with herself, that there's a lot of pain attached to how that time was. It feels like thinking about a different person.
It just really shows that recovery is yes, there's an importance of having a team around you and loving people that love you, but until you can get to that point where you love yourself enough to want to change,
I do think sometimes that people who I took completely for granted, how I had a support network. You're around that time, your and I's relationship was really fraught. It was a push-pull. You couldn't connect with the eating disorder, but then when I wanted softness and I wanted you to love me, it was confusing for you and you didn't know how. And so it was really a difficult time for us, but I still had loving parents who would fight to the ends of the earth to make sure I was safe. And I still didn't get better until I decided I wanted to get better. But maybe that's the control thing too. It's like, I will decide this, and this will be my choice. And that stubbornness, lovely little stubbornness I have within me, I think still exists to this day.
likes to pop up just to say hello.
I'll do it my way, and I'll decide when I won't do it my way anymore.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to give my perspective of
absolutely,
what we had to go through. My heart goes out to every parent that is in a situation where they have a mentally unwell child, and how helpless you are. And I remember the moment that I looked at your diary. I was hoovering downstairs, and just this thought came into my head: go and check Megan's diary, and that's not something that I do, but I was very drawn to it. So I was supposed to see that, because in there was this plan of how you wanted to starve yourself. So I've always felt like my job was to save you. That innate primal role as your mum is to just be one step ahead of you. But of course, I was never one step ahead of you. I was always one step behind you because of the manipulation and the secretiveness of the illnesses.
Yeah.
My intuition had to be on high alert the whole time. And the control of the illness caught into the control of me wanting to control you.
Yeah.
And so it became this big battle of, well, I got to save you. And you were going, no, you're not going to save me. I'm going to do it my way. This is my body, my life. And as the illness progressed, watching you trying to take your life, and I think it was 8 times that you tried to do it. Now, as a human being and as your mum, that is probably too much to take. And so my brain was shutting down. My subconscious was shutting down in order to be able to handle it. And I think the relationship that we had at the end was 2 shells.
Yeah.
There was such a disconnect because I had to shut down in order to cope with the idea that I would lose you one day. And towards the end of your teens, it really felt like a possibility.
Yeah.
Me and your dad and Sam we'd had many conversations about preparing ourselves for that, because you were a runaway train at that point.
Yeah.
And so, and I can really get now why you needed to go off and do this in secret and not tell anybody, but you had so many angels around you that your friends let us know every single time. And so in your head, you constructed a story. I'm going to go off and I'm just going to die. And then it was never like that, because there was always somebody that had your back.
Yeah.
But I do remember a really cathartic moment was after you'd come back from university and you were recovering from that final episode, but you were still feeling very suicidal. And as a therapist also that supports people through suicidal ideation, it's allowing that openness of the person to talk about it. And I remember us sitting at the table and me just putting aside totally my ego, totally my fears, and just being able to allow you to take control of your life path. What do you want to do, Megs? Do you want in, or do you want out? And reflecting back on that conversation, it's unbelievable to think that as a mum, I'm talking about, if you want to go, Megs, then I let you go, and to give you your freedom of choice.
Yeah.
And I remember us sitting down and talking about how to plan your funeral and what songs you would have, and how you want it to play out, and how I was going to cope after. It was to me that felt like the turning point, because you'd been really heard of how awful it was, and I could see how awful it was. There's nothing anybody could do.
Yeah.
And who am I to stop you?
I remember talking about like funeral songs with you, but I think I felt embarrassed that we'd got to that point. Yeah.
Well, it really was putting it back in your shoes, a bit like the doctor putting it back in your shoes.
Yeah.
You go back and meet yourself, and okay, this is my choice now.
Yeah.
Is this what I really want?
Yeah.
So
I think the biggest, although it was horrible at the time, the most helpful thing that you all did was say, we can't do this. Like, we can't save you, and your path is your path now. And for a lot of parents hearing that, they might think, how can you give up on your child, basically? But you weren't giving up on me. You'd given me everything, and this was just the last resort of thinking there was nothing more we can do. It was almost like not supporting it, but just being like,
it's accepting it.
Acceptance. And I think that almost was like a, hang on a minute, what? I don't want that. But it gave me the space to fight for myself, and that it was it was my choice to get better because there was no one else around me fighting for me anymore. And it was almost like right, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for me. And it's created, pardon me, the most like resilient recovery, because everything I do now is for myself and my future, not to be better for you or to make you or my family happier. It's because I bloody well deserve to be happy, and that's a
Because that's
really
quite a
strong.
responsibility to live your life for somebody else.
Yeah,
When people are hanging around for someone else, then that you're not living your life.
but I think that might have been part of the problem, because I still cared, so particularly in the earlier years of the anorexia, I still cared so much about what you all thought, and I found it like I was rubbish at lying to you, and I, I would still, eat dinner in front of you if I had to, because I didn't want to upset you and I wanted to please you, and so it was almost like that's why it just became more and more secretive, because I wanted to be the right person for you all. I wanted to do it properly, and I didn't want to cause a scene. And it was only as I got older and the eating disorder broke my brain that I then became more argumentative, and more my behaviours became much more ingrained. But definitely at the start, it was very like people pleasing and doing the recovery for you because I had to, as opposed to doing it for me. And that's the shift that anyone needs when they're trying to change their life. They need to do it for themselves.
At some point, there became a very angry Megan that came out, wasn't there?
I don't remember her very much. Chair throwing and things.
Yes, barricading in rooms.
I'm laughing because it's just so not me. It's just like
But that
so
passive
consumed.
child.
Yeah.
Because you never had a voice to
No,
that point.
exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a huge thanks to every myself, but to everybody. How forgiving everyone is that we all went through all of that, and yet we're all still a great unit, and that love each other, and that it's got to the point now, which I really enjoy, that we're able to joke about it, and that for me is like, I find that really helpful because it takes the stigma and the shame away from it, and it's just like a.
In terms of our relationship, I don't think it really started to heal until two years ago.
More than that, I'd say,
2
but
years ago.
when you moved to Spain, I think, and I came out to stay, and I just think it was waiting till I was 25 and had a fully formed amygdala. I think I just became a normal human being then, and I was able to process things really differently. And I think there's a huge power in that actually we're not rational human beings till we're 25, 26. And so I think that I was able to connect to you as an adult, not as a petulant child.
And as your mum, it wasn't safe for me to have a relationship with you because every time, and you still go through the anorexic patterns. They still show themselves when you're going through stress. And because of the trauma of it all, my brain immediately goes back into, I got to save you. I got to save you. And so it was really hard for us to even have a normal relationship because I was constantly terrified I was going to lose you. And it's not until you were able to reassure me, I was able to forgive you, you were able to forgive me. And it was in that forgiveness of each other, of the experiences that we had, were we both able to relax into each other's company.
Yeah.
And build that safety in our relationship and be able to communicate through conflict. And it worked like magic.
It did. But I think a huge part of that is that I am better for the most part. And, at Christmas I had a real dip and our relationship struggled. And I think that's because we connect so well on a human to human level when we're both well. And I become a different person when I eat less.
And I go back to that mum trying to save you.
And I'm like, I'm an adult now, leave me alone, mum.
This is all your fault, mum.
And then I eat and I warm up
games.
and I'm better. And, it's every relationship in my life is better when I am better. And that isn't just of years of trauma. It's just anyone who can relate to being hungry. It makes you a different person. And then if you couple that with crippling thoughts of self-destruct. It doesn't make for a very engaging, warm person. And I know food is the secret weapon to make me a nicer person, and it makes it easier to nourish myself when I know that it makes my relationships better and makes me better. And
so, in terms of your recovery and the new learning you have about yourself, what helps you to stay on track?
I'm very aware of repercussions, and I think of it that, for example, this year I in January found out that I had really severe stress fractures in my knees and my hips that were a complete result of years of over exercising and years of malnutrition. And so now not only is it the mental impacts of not eating, that my body is now telling me you've got to fix this. And I think that as I get older, I recognize that I want to have kids. I want to be strong. I want to be active. I want to be healthy. And it's like thinking of the repercussions, right? And remember, as a self-harming teenager, and you would say, like, one day you're going to have to explain what those marks are to your children. And that's really stuck in my head and is still a barrier now to if I, and I very rarely get the thoughts now, but if I do, it is like how do you want to explain that mark to someone that you love or someone that loves you? And that stops me. So there's a lot of accountability between not wanting to hurt myself, but also recognizing that there are repercussions. And that is just not so bloody draining. And I think back to Christmas where it took over really quickly and I was really struggling, and it just ruined my Christmas because I wasn't able to connect. And you were all eating these amazing German breads and pates and cheeses, and I was there with my bloody blueberries just nibbling away. And it's just sad, and I don't want to be the sad person now. I want, because when I'm connected, I am a really bubbly, really positive person, and I love that version of myself. And the eating disorder or the negative thoughts really pull that part of me away, and I don't like that. So
Real
it's
thief of the
yeah. So I suppose it's just fighting for the person who I actually like that I've become. For the most part, keeps me on track, and I can't get it right all the time, but I do a fairly
And I
good
know
job.
that over the last 5 months, it's been a big life lesson for you to have
To
all your
just
coping
sit down.
mechanisms taken away from you. And I have to say, as an observer, you've handled it amazingly. And I know you've gone through a real journey with it. But what do you think you've come out with now, 5 months on, and you've been operated on and you're getting your mobility back, being more
Yeah.
mobile?
Well, I think getting the news came at a time where I was in a real stage of obsessive exercise. And I remember coming out when the doctor told me, you need to stop now, and it all stops. Otherwise, you're going to be back here with broken everything and severe acute fractures and all this stuff. And I came out and I couldn't get through to you. So then I rang Dad, and I was sobbing, like hysterically crying. And Dad thought I'd just been given a terminal diagnosis. He was like, Megan, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, they've said I can't run anymore. He's like, for fuck's sake, I thought you were going to die. But for me, it felt like the end of the world. I was hysterical, and I was, I'm not going to survive this. And then I shifted the narrative, and I got really into understanding how food fuels your body and gives you things that you need, and that, resting your body and your muscles is actually so important. And I've come to a place now of acceptance, and like, I'm thankful for my body, because really it hasn't changed. And yes, I've become softer, but then there's something quite nice about being softer, and I recognize I'm almost a nicer person. And that I don't, the way that I controlled things before, it took so much energy, so much time, so much exhaustion to have a body that looked pretty much the same as it does when I've sat on my bum for 5 months, which again shouldn't be part of it. It shouldn't be about the way that I look. And I think actually taking the time to just rest and just be in me and recognize that I don't need to be busy to run away from my thoughts, and that I'm actually, the bad thoughts aren't there in the same way that they were before. And I don't need to run from things now, because I am generally quite well. And I really do think I've come out with a really different mentality that even at the start of the 5 months, I was really trying to control the food and trying to control that I need all these nutrients in me. And then I was at a barbecue last night and I was like, oh, I don't really want those vegetables. I think I'll just have a hot dog. And that's like such a huge shift for me, who, for the listener who doesn't know, would eat a broccoli a day, and that I love vegetables. And actually, I look back and maybe that was not very healthy either. So it's been a huge shift and a huge acceptance that I can be happy and healthy and not be totally controlling of what I put in my mouth and what I see on the scale and what I go for a run like. And it's been a big shift. So I really hope that as I get back into exercise, that it will be from a really different place this time. Or like punishment, just I'm moving my body because it feels good to move my body, and I can't wait to get back to it. And yet I'm thinking of different ways I can do it, that I join a sports team or a Pilates class, or things that are communal and fun, not just me punishing myself for hours on end. So it's
boundaries around it.
Yeah, it saved me, really. I think I was on a really downward path after Christmas, and had that not happened, I mean, I was going down a very destructive path. So one up there looking after me, saying, not again, not again.
Your guardian angel's going.
Yeah, they're going, you fucking idiot. Yeah, exactly.
And then one final note, if you could give any advice or any golden nugget for if anybody with an eating disorder is listening to this, or if there are any family members are listening, what do you think you could offer as a way of turning it round?
Blimey, that's a big question. Really, and from my experience, is learning that as a family, trying to control it will only destroy. Like, I watched it destroy you, just micromanaging it, but never giving up, I think, is the difference. So it's like finding that balance, that you let them find it for themselves, because that's what I did, and it must be so awful to watch, but the only reason that I am the person who I am now is because I chose for myself that I wanted to get better. And I think that even when you're in the eating disorder, although it keeps you or manipulates you to think that you want to stay with it, you still have so many moments of like, I just want to be better, I wish I could be normal. And it's when you have those moments, whether that's creating a journal where you write down every single time you feel like you have a fleeting moment of wanting to recover, and just enabling yourself to have that. But a support network, having a therapist, not letting your family get so intertwined with it, because you lose the support network then, because everyone's just managing the eating disorder. But
that was one of the most powerful things that a psychologist said to us when we had a family meeting, is that don't let the eating disorder control the family.
Yeah.
You get on with your lives and let Megan sort her eating disorder, and it will catch up.
And it did. And I think that, things...
turning point.
So there's no one way to fix an eating disorder. That's why people have them for years. That's why, unfortunately, it's the highest rate of mortality within mental health conditions. And it's awful. And I wish that I had the golden nugget that could make everyone just recover, but it doesn't work like that, as sad as that is to say. But I have lots of people in my life who have recovered from an eating disorder, and that it is totally possible. It's fucking hard work, but yeah, I guess as cringe as it is to say like recovery is possible, there's a better chance of a better life, but you have to decide for yourself if you want that. And that's that. We probably need about 4 episodes at least, don't we?
We can always come back.
Yeah,
there's plenty of material there.
Exactly.
We're very blessed as a family to have all learnt from you as well. And I know in my job it's helped me to help people with this condition too. So thank you. If anybody wants to get in touch, then the information's in the bio. Or anyone with questions you want to get to Megan, I can certainly pass that on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thank you, Megan, and I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you. Love you, Mum.
Love you too.
Bye.